The explosion tore through the morning air like thunder, and Josephine Nichols felt the floor of the general store buckle beneath her feet before the world went dark with dust and splintered wood. Pain shot through her left leg as something massive crushed down across her body, pinning her to the floorboards while screams echoed through the haze, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled her lungs. Trinidad, Colorado had been peaceful just moments before. The spring of 1883 had brought warmth to the mountain valley, and Josephine had been restocking shelves in her father's general store when the bank across the street erupted in flame and destruction. The outlaws had used too much dynamite, far too much, and now half the street was collapsing like dominoes. Through the settling dust, she could hear men shouting, horses screaming, gunfire cracking in sharp bursts. The beam across her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, crushing the air from her chest with each attempted breath. She tried to push against it, but her arms had no leverage, no strength against such weight. Blood soaked warm through her skirt where something sharp had torn into her thigh. "Help," she tried to call out, but it came as barely a whisper. The air was too thick, too heavy with debris. Her vision swam at the edges, darkness creeping in. She was going to die here, she realized with strange clarity. 22 years old, and she would die on the floor of her father's store, crushed under a beam while outlaws robbed the bank and shot up the town. She thought of her mother, dead these 5 years. At least she would see her again. Then a shadow moved through the dust. Boots appeared in her limited field of vision, worn leather coated in a fine layer of gray powder. A man dropped to one knee beside her, and through her blurring sight she saw a face she did not recognize. He was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His jaw was set firm as he assessed the situation, his hands already moving to test the weight of the beam. "Hold on," he said, his voice rough but steady, not panicked. "I am going to get you out." "Too heavy," Josephine managed to gasp. "Get help." "No time." He moved to the beam, positioning himself, and she saw the way his shoulders tensed beneath his dusty shirt. "When I lift, you pull yourself out. Use your arms." She wanted to tell him it was impossible, that the beam must weigh 300 pounds at least, that he would hurt himself trying. But he was already gripping the charred wood, already setting his boots firm against the broken floor. Outside, the gunfire continued. Someone shouted about the marshal being down. The cowboy took a breath, and then he lifted. Josephine watched in disbelief as the beam rose off her body, inch by impossible inch. The man's face went red with the strain, the veins in his neck standing out like cords, his teeth gritted so hard she could hear them grinding. But he lifted it. He actually lifted it, raising it high enough that light and air rushed back to her crushed body. "Now," he growled through clenched teeth. She scrambled with her arms, ignoring the screaming pain in her leg as she dragged herself across the floor. Splinters tore at her palms, but she kept moving, kept pulling until she was clear. The moment she was free, the cowboy let the beam drop with a thunderous crash that shook the entire building. He bent forward, hands on his knees, dragging in great gasps of air. "Thank you," Josephine breathed, but he was already moving again, already kneeling beside her to examine her injuries. His hands were surprisingly gentle as they assessed the gash in her leg, the bruising already darkening across her ribs. "We need to get you to a doctor," he said. "Can you walk?" She tried to move her injured leg and nearly blacked out from the pain. "I do not think so." More gunfire cracked outside, closer now. The cowboy's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the shattered storefront, then back at her. She could see him making calculations, weighing options. "The doctor is 3 miles out of town," he said. "His office is on the north road, but those outlaws are between us and the horses. Leave me." Josephine said, though the thought terrified her. Save yourself. He looked at her like she had spoken a foreign language. Not a chance, miss. Then, before she could protest, he was scooping her up into his arms, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. She gasped at the sudden movement, her injured leg screaming in protest, but his hold was firm and steady. What are you doing? She demanded as he carried her toward the back of the store. Getting you to that doctor, he said simply. Hold on tight. He kicked open the back door and stepped out into the alley behind the main street. The sounds of chaos were slightly muffled here, but she could still hear men shouting, could still smell smoke and gunpowder on the wind. The cowboy moved quickly despite her weight, his boots steady on the packed earth as he headed away from the town center. I am Austin Jennings, he said as he walked, his breathing still even despite carrying her. Figured you should know the name of your rescuer. Josephine Nichols, she replied, one arm wrapped around his shoulders to keep herself stable. She could feel the solid strength of him, the warmth of his body through his shirt. My father owns the general store, owned it. She swallowed hard, not wanting to think about what condition the building might be in. He was not inside. No, thank God. He went to Denver yesterday. He will be back tomorrow. Her voice cracked slightly. He is going to come home to this disaster. Austin adjusted his grip on her slightly, his arms tightening. At least he will come home to you alive. That is what will matter to him. They had reached the edge of town now, where the buildings gave way to open land dotted with scrub brush and pine trees. The road to the north was little more than a dirt track, winding up into the hills. 3 miles, he had said. 3 miles of carrying her full weight in the May heat. You cannot carry me 3 miles, Josephine said, voicing the impossible reality of it. Please just set me down, go find a horse or a wagon. And leave you here where those outlaws might come riding through. Austin shook his head firmly. No, miss. I made a promise to get you to that doctor, and I keep my promises. He started up the road, and Josephine felt guilt wash through her with each step. She was not a small woman, standing 5'6" and solid from years of working in the store, hauling crates and sacks. He would exhaust himself. But when she opened her mouth to protest again, the look on his face stopped her. There was a determination there that would not be swayed by logic or concern, so instead she said, Where are you from, Austin Jennings? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Making conversation to pass the time. Trying to distract myself from the pain. It was not entirely a lie. Her leg throbbed with each of his steps, and her ribs ached where the beam had crushed them. Kansas, he said after a moment. Little town called Abilene. Came out to Colorado 3 months ago looking for work. Been cowboying at the Double M Ranch about 10 miles south of Trinidad. What brought you into town today? Supplies. Boss sent me in with a list of things we needed. His voice turned grim. I was tying my horse up at the hitching post when that bank exploded. Saw your building start to collapse and figured someone might be inside. Josephine studied his profile as he walked. He had a strong face, weathered by sun and wind but still young. There was a scar along his jawline, faded white against his tanned skin. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes stayed focused on the road ahead even as he spoke to her. You risked your life for a stranger, she said softly. Would not be much of a man if I did not. He said it matter-of-factly, as though running into a collapsing building was simply the expected thing to do. They walked in silence for a while. Josephine could see the strain starting to show in his face, the tightness around his eyes, the way his breathing was growing slightly heavier. Sweat dampened his shirt between his shoulder blades where her hand rested. But he did not slow down. He just kept walking, kept carrying her up that long dirt road while the sun climbed higher in the sky. Tell me about the ranch, she said, needing to distract him now, needing to keep him talking so he would not think about the weight in his arms or the miles still ahead. Austin cleared his throat. The Double M. It is a good spread. About 2,000 head of cattle, couple hundred horses. The owner, Mr. Mitchell, he is fair and pays decent. The work is hard but honest. He paused, adjusting his grip on her again. I have been saving my wages. Figured maybe in a few years I could buy some land of my own, start a small ranch. Nothing big, just enough to make a living. That sounds like a good dream, Josephine said. She found herself genuinely interested despite the pain radiating through her body. Do you have family back in Kansas? Not anymore. Something sad flickered across his face. My parents died of fever when I was 19. My sister and her husband took over the family farm. I did not want to be a burden, so I struck out on my own. He glanced down at her. What about you? Just you and your father? Yes. My mother died when I was 17, cholera. Even after 5 years, it hurt to say it. After that, it has just been father and me running the store, or it was until today. The building might not be as bad as you think. Sometimes these things look worse than they are. She appreciated the attempt at comfort, but they both knew the explosion had been massive. Still, she nodded and let the subject drop. Instead, she found herself noticing other things. The way Austin's arms stayed steady around her despite his growing exhaustion. The care he took to keep her injured leg from jostling too much. The little adjustments he made to his hold to keep her comfortable. They crested a hill, and she could see the road stretching ahead, winding through a valley of grassland dotted with wildflowers. It was beautiful country, the kind that made you understand why people came west despite all the dangers and hardships. The peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose in the distance, still capped with snow even in May. How much further? She asked. About halfway, Austin said. His voice was strained now, and she could feel the tremor starting in his arms. He was pushing himself past his limits, she realized. For her, for a woman he did not even know. Austin, please, let us rest, just for a few minutes. He slowed, seemed to consider, then shook his head. Your leg needs treatment. The longer we wait, the worse it could get. I can make it. You are going to collapse. I am not. But even as he said it, she felt him stumble slightly over a rock in the road. He caught himself, kept moving, but the stumble scared her. I will not be responsible for you killing yourself trying to save me, Josephine said firmly. Rest. 5 minutes, please. This time he listened. He carried her off the road to where a large boulder provided some shade, then carefully lowered her to sit with her back against the rock. The moment her weight was gone from his arms, he bent forward, bracing his hands on his knees, his chest heaving. Sweat poured down his face and his arms shook visibly. Josephine watched him with a mixture of admiration and worry. When was the last time you ate? She asked. This morning. Dawn. That was 6 hours ago. She looked around helplessly. She had nothing, no food or water. Everything had been lost in the store collapse. Austin straightened with effort, rolling his shoulders back. I am fine. Just needed to catch my breath. You are not fine, you are exhausted. She looked up at him, this stranger who had saved her life and was now sacrificing himself to get her to safety. Why are you doing this? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at her for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes searching hers. Because you needed help, he said finally. Because leaving you there was not an option I could live with. But 3 miles carrying me. Austin, that is too much to ask of anyone. You did not ask. I am offering. He moved to kneel beside her, checking the makeshift bandage he had tied around her leg using a strip torn from his own shirt. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped entirely. Besides, he added, his voice softer now, I could not live with myself if something happened to you because I gave up too soon. There was something in the way he said it, in the way he looked at her, that made Josephine's breath catch. She had known this man for less than 2 hours, but in that time he had shown her more courage and selflessness than she had seen in most people's lifetimes. He had lifted an impossible weight to free her. He was carrying her miles to save her life. And he was looking at her now like she mattered, like she was worth all this effort and pain. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Austin's hand covered hers where it rested on her lap just for a moment. His palm was rough with calluses but warm. "You are welcome, Josephine." The use of her first name sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She found herself noticing details she had been too frightened and pain-addled to see before. The way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he almost smiled. The strength in his jaw. The gentleness in his touch despite his rough exterior. After 5 minutes, true to his word, Austin stood and scooped her back into his arms. She wanted to protest, but knew it would do no good. Instead, she settled against his chest and tried to make herself as light as possible, as if wishing could somehow reduce her weight. They continued up the road. The sun beat down mercilessly now, and Josephine used her hand to try to shade Austin's face, earning her a grateful glance. They passed a homestead in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. A dog barked somewhere out of sight. "You have someone waiting for you?" Austin asked suddenly. A husband or a beau? The question surprised her. "No, there was someone once, but he moved to California 2 years ago." "Did not ask me to come with him." She paused. "What about you?" "No one." He adjusted his grip again. "The cowboy life does not leave much room for courting. We are out on the range most of the time, sleeping under the stars, moving cattle. It is a lonely life in some ways." "Do you like it, though, the work?" "I do." There was genuine feeling in his voice. "There is something about being out there with nothing but the land and the sky and the animals. Makes you feel part of something bigger, makes your problems seem smaller." He glanced down at her. "Though I admit, a home to come back to would be nice. Someone to share it all with." Josephine felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. There was an implication in his words, or perhaps she was imagining it, projecting her own sudden feelings onto him. But the way he looked at her suggested maybe she was not imagining anything at all. They crested another hill and Austin stopped, pointing. "There. That is Doc Morrison's place." Josephine followed his gaze and saw a small house with a painted sign hanging from the porch declaring it a medical office. Relief flooded through her so intensely she almost wept. They had made it. Somehow, impossibly, Austin had carried her the entire 3 miles. He started down the hill toward the doctor's house, moving faster now that the end was in sight. By the time they reached the front porch, his legs were shaking, and his face had gone pale beneath the sunburn and exertion. He managed to kick the door rather than knock, having no free hand. A woman in her 50s opened it, her eyes widening at the sight of them. "Good Lord, what happened?" "Explosion in Trinidad," Austin managed. "She is hurt bad, needs the doctor." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Morrison, the doctor's wife, ushered them quickly inside to a clean examination room. Austin finally, carefully, lowered Josephine onto the padded table. The moment she was settled, his knees buckled and he caught himself against the wall. "You need to sit down before you fall down, Mrs. Morrison said firmly, pulling over a chair. She practically pushed Austin into it, then thrust a cup of water into his hands. "Drink that. Then I will get you another." Dr. Morrison appeared, a thin man with wire spectacles and capable hands. He was already rolling up his sleeves as he approached Josephine. "Let us see what we are dealing with here." The next hour passed in a haze of pain and medical attention. The doctor cleaned and stitched the gash in her leg, which had gone deep into the muscle. Her ribs were badly bruised but not broken, and he wrapped them tightly. She had various cuts and scrapes that needed tending, and a bump on her head that concerned him. Through it all, Austin stayed in that chair watching. Mrs. Morrison brought him food and water, which he consumed mechanically, but his eyes never left Josephine for long. When she cried out during the worst of the stitching, his hands clenched on the arms of the chair and his jaw went tight. Finally, Dr. Morrison stepped back. "You will live, young lady, but it was a close thing. That leg wound could have bled out if you had not gotten here when you did." He looked over at Austin. "You saved her life, son, twice from what my wife tells me." Austin ducked his head, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what needed doing." "Well, she is going to need rest and care for the next few weeks. That leg cannot bear weight for at least 10 days, and those ribs need time to heal." The doctor looked between them. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I heard the explosion from here." "Is the town in bad shape?" "I do not know," Josephine admitted. "My father is in Denver. He will not be back until tomorrow." Mrs. Morrison spoke up. "You will stay here tonight at least. We have a spare room. Tomorrow we can assess the situation and figure out what is best." Josephine wanted to protest, to not impose further on these kind people, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves. The pain medicine the doctor had given her was making everything soft and fuzzy at the edges. "Thank you," she murmured. Austin stood, swaying slightly. "I should get back to town, see if I can help with the cleanup, check on my horse." "You are not going anywhere tonight," Mrs. Morrison said firmly. "Look at you, you can barely stand. You will stay as well. We will make up a pallet in the sitting room." This time Austin did not have the energy to argue. He nodded wearily and let Mrs. Morrison lead him away. Josephine watched him go, wanting to say something, wanting to thank him again, but her eyes were already closing. The doctor helped her drink some more water, then pulled a blanket over her. "Sleep, Miss Nichols. You are safe now." She slept and dreamed of strong arms carrying her and storm-gray eyes that looked at her like she was precious. When Josephine woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and her mouth was dry as cotton. Every part of her body ached, but especially her leg, which throbbed with dull insistence. She tried to sit up and gasped at the pull in her ribs. Easy now. Austin was suddenly there, his hand gentle on her shoulder, helping her settle back against the pillows. "Doc said you need to move slow." "How long did I sleep?" Her voice came out raspy. "About 16 hours. It is morning now, nearly 9 o'clock." He held a cup of water to her lips, and she drank gratefully. He looked better than he had yesterday, still tired but no longer on the verge of collapse. His hair was damp like he had washed, and he had shaved the dust and stubble from his face. "You should have gone back to the ranch," Josephine said. "Your boss will wonder where you are." "I sent word with a rider who passed through early this morning, told him what happened." Austin set the cup aside and settled into the chair beside her bed. "I was not leaving without knowing you were going to be all right." Something warm bloomed in Josephine's chest. "You have done so much already." "Not enough. I should have gotten you here faster. You were in pain the whole way." "Austin, you carried me 3 miles. That is beyond what anyone could expect." She reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I owe you my life. How do I ever repay that?" He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. His eyes were so intense, so full of feeling that it made her breath catch. "You do not owe me anything, Josephine, but if you are asking what I want." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I want to know you, really know you. I want to hear about your life, your dreams. I want to make you smile. I want the right to check on you while you heal, to make sure you are cared for." Josephine's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "We barely know each other. I know you are brave. I know you tried to tell me to leave you behind to save myself. I know you worried about me even while you were the one who was injured." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "I know that when I look at you, something in my chest feels different than it ever has before." She should have been frightened by the intensity of it, by how fast this was all happening. They had met during a crisis, had spent hours in pain and fear and exhaustion. These feelings might not be real. They might just be the result of heightened emotions and circumstances. But when she looked into Austin's eyes, she did not see anything false or fleeting. She saw something that felt solid and real and right. "I feel it too," she whispered. The smile that broke across Austin's face was like sunrise. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then let me court you properly, Josephine Nichols. Let me come calling and take you on walks when you are healed. Let me prove that this is not just about what happened yesterday, but about what could happen tomorrow." "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." Mrs. Morrison appeared in the doorway with a breakfast tray, took one look at them holding hands and smiling at each other, and shook her head with fond exasperation. "Young love," she muttered, but she was smiling too. Later that morning, a rider came from Trinidad with news. The outlaws had been caught by a posse about 10 miles south of town. 3 of them were dead, 2 captured. The marshal had taken a bullet to the shoulder but would survive. The bank had been destroyed, and several buildings on Main Street were badly damaged. The general store, he said with an apologetic look at Josephine, had lost its entire front section and part of the roof. "But it is still standing," the rider assured her. "The back rooms are intact." "Your father arrived early this morning. He has been looking for you, miss. He is worried sick." Relief and worry warred in Josephine's chest. "I need to see him. He needs to know I am alive." "I will ride back and tell him where you are," the rider offered. "Save him from tearing the territory apart looking for you." "Thank you," Josephine said. "Please tell him I am well. Injured but healing." After the rider left, Austin helped Josephine into a chair by the window where she could look out at the mountains. He had borrowed a book from the doctor's collection and read to her, his voice low and soothing. She found herself less interested in the story than in watching him read, the way his expression changed with the narrative, the way he occasionally glanced up to check if she was enjoying it. Her father arrived just after noon, riding hard, and burst into the house with wild eyes. "Josephine, father." She tried to stand, but her leg would not support her. Then he was there, wrapping her carefully in his arms, his body shaking. "I thought I lost you," Walter Nichols said, his voice breaking. "When I saw the store, when no one could tell me where you were, I thought, 'I am here, father. I am safe.'" She held him tight, breathing in the familiar smell of pipe tobacco and peppermint that always clung to him. "Thanks to Austin." Her father pulled back and looked at Austin, who had stood respectfully when the older man entered. Walter Nichols was 55, graying but still strong, with the weathered face of a man who had spent his life working hard. He studied Austin with the assessing eye of a father looking at a man who clearly had feelings for his daughter. "The rider told me what you did," Walter said. "Told me you lifted a beam off her and carried her 3 miles. Austin shifted uncomfortably. "It was the only thing to do, sir." "No, son. It was the heroic thing to do, the extraordinary thing." Walter crossed to him and held out his hand. "Thank you for saving my daughter's life. I am in your debt." They shook hands, and Josephine saw her father sizing Austin up, taking in the honest eyes and firm handshake, the respectful posture. She saw the moment her father decided he approved, the slight softening around his eyes. "Where are you staying, Mr. Jennings?" Walter asked. "At the Double M Ranch, sir, about 10 miles south of town. I am a ranch hand there." "Good honest work," Walter nodded. "And are you intending to continue coming around my daughter, father?" Josephine protested, her face flaming. "It is all right," Austin said. He looked Walter straight in the eye. "Yes, sir. With your permission, I would like to court Josephine properly." Walter looked between them, saw the way they could not stop glancing at each other, the way his daughter's face lit up when Austin spoke. He sighed. "Well, I suppose I cannot object to the man who saved her life. But you treat her with respect, you hear me? And you will have to be patient. She is going to need time to heal before she can go on any proper outings." "I understand, sir. I am a patient man. We will see about that." But Walter was almost smiling. He turned to Josephine. "As for you, young lady, the back rooms of the store are intact. I have already started cleaning up. Doc Morrison says you can travel tomorrow if we are careful. I will take you home then." "What about the store?" Josephine asked. "How bad is it really?" Her father's face grew solemn. "The front is gone. We lost most of the inventory that was out on the floor, but the stockroom is fine and the structure is still sound. It will take time and money to rebuild, but we will manage. We Nichols always do." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. The store had been her life, her daily routine. Seeing it damaged hurt almost as much as her physical injuries. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. Austin reached over and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back, drawing strength from his presence. The next day, Walter returned with a wagon lined with blankets and pillows. Austin and the doctor carefully lifted Josephine into the back, arranging her so that her injured leg was elevated and her ribs had support. Austin climbed into the back with her, insisting on holding her steady during the journey so that the bumps would not jostle her too much. The ride back to Trinidad took over an hour, Walter driving carefully to avoid the worst of the ruts. Josephine alternated between dozing against Austin's shoulder and watching the landscape pass. His arm stayed around her the entire way, steady and sure. When they finally reached Trinidad, Josephine was shocked by the damage. The bank was nothing but a shell, its walls blackened and crumbling. Several other buildings showed blast damage, windows blown out and facades cracked. And her father's store, the place where she had worked since she was old enough to count change, was missing its entire front wall. The interior was exposed like a dollhouse, shelves knocked over, merchandise scattered and destroyed. But the back rooms, as her father had said, were intact. He had already set up a temporary living space in what had been the storage area, hanging blankets for privacy, and bringing in furniture salvaged from their upstairs apartment. Austin carried her inside and settled her on the bed her father had made up. "It is not much right now," Walter said apologetically, "but it will do until we can rebuild." "It is perfect, father," Josephine assured him. "We are together and we are safe. That is all that matters." Austin stayed for another hour, helping Walter arrange things for Josephine's comfort. Before he left, he knelt beside her bed and took her hand. "I will come back tomorrow after work," he promised, "and every day after that if you will have me." "I will have you," she said softly, "every day." He kissed her hand again, letting his lips linger this time, then stood and tipped his hat to her father. "Mr. Nichols, Josephine." Then he was gone, and the room felt emptier without him. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Austin came every evening after finishing his work at the ranch, riding the 10 miles into town no matter how tired he was. He brought her wildflowers picked on the ride-in. He read to her from books borrowed from the church library. He told her stories about life on the ranch, about ornery cattle and mischievous horses, and the other cowboys he worked with. In turn, Josephine told him about growing up in Trinidad, about her mother and the hole her death had left, about her dreams of someday expanding the store to include a lending library. They talked about everything and nothing, building a foundation of true knowledge and friendship beneath the attraction that had sparked between them. Walter watched it all with the careful eye of a protective father, but even he could not find fault with Austin. The young cowboy was respectful, hardworking, and clearly devoted to Josephine. He helped with the store reconstruction without being asked, spending his one day off each week swinging a hammer alongside Walter and the other men from town who had volunteered their labor. 3 weeks after the explosion, Josephine was finally able to walk short distances with the aid of a crutch. Austin took her outside for the first time, walking slowly beside her as she made her careful way around the building. The May sunshine felt glorious on her face after so many days inside. "Look," Austin said, pointing. "They have the new front wall framed up already." Indeed, the store was taking shape again. It would be smaller than before, Walter having decided to use the insurance money wisely rather than rebuild to the exact same size. But it would be sturdy and functional, with a new coat of paint and a sign that would read, "Nichols General Store, established 1877. "It is going to be beautiful," Josephine said. Then, because she had been thinking about it for days, because the feelings had only grown stronger with each passing day, she added, "I will miss working there." Austin looked at her in confusion. "Why would you miss it? You will be back at work as soon as your leg heals fully." "I might not be here," she took a breath, gathering her courage. "Austin, we have been courting for 3 weeks now. I know that is not very long, but I also know what I feel. I know that you are the man I want to spend my life with." She turned to face him fully, balancing on her crutch. "If you asked me to marry you, I would say yes. And if you wanted to start that ranch you have been dreaming about, I would go with you wherever that was." Austin stared at her, his expression stunned. "Josephine, I am just a ranch hand. I do not have much saved yet. I could not provide for you the way you deserve, not right away." "I do not need much," she said. "I need you, the rest we can build together." He set down the package he had been carrying and took both her hands in his. "Are you sure? Your whole life is here. Your father, the store." "My whole life is standing right in front of me," Josephine said simply. Austin's face transformed, joy lighting it from within. "Then yes. Yes, I am asking. Josephine Nichols, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than money and help me build something lasting?" "Yes," she laughed, and then he was kissing her, careful of her injuries but firm and sure and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josephine saw her father watching from the doorway of the store. For a moment she worried he would be upset. But then Walter smiled and gave them a small nod before disappearing back inside. They told him officially that night over dinner. Walter sighed and grumbled about losing his best employee and his daughter in one go, but his eyes were warm. "I suppose I should have seen this coming," he admitted. "The moment I saw how you looked at each other at the doctor's house, I knew." "We want your blessing, Father," Josephine said. Walter looked at Austin. "Do you love her? More than anything, sir? Will you be faithful to her, put her needs alongside your own? Build a life with her rather than just for yourself?" "I will, sir. I swear it." Walter nodded slowly. "Then you have my blessing. But," he added with a pointed look, "you will wait a decent interval before the wedding. Give people time to adjust to the idea and give Josephine time to heal properly." "Of course, sir," Austin agreed. "I was thinking perhaps late summer, August maybe." "That seems reasonable." Walter raised his glass. "To Austin and Josephine, may you be as happy together as her mother and I were." They clinked glasses, and Josephine felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears this time, not tears of pain or fear. Everything was coming together in ways she could never have imagined just a month ago. The summer passed in a blur of healing and planning and hard work. Josephine's leg healed cleanly, though the doctor said she might always have a slight limp when she was tired. The store was rebuilt and reopened in July, with a celebration that brought the whole town out. The community had rallied around Trinidad after the bank robbery, determined not to let outlaws destroy what they had built. Austin and Josephine saw each other nearly every day. When she was fully mobile again, he took her riding, going slowly on a gentle mare borrowed from the ranch. They had picnics by the river that ran through the valley. They attended church socials and dances, where Austin proved to be surprisingly graceful for a man who spent his days on horseback, and they planned. Austin's boss at the Double M, impressed by his dedication and work ethic, offered to sell him 50 acres of land on the edge of the ranch property at a fair price. It was good grazing land with access to water, enough to start a small operation. Austin used every penny of his savings as down payment and arranged to pay the rest over 5 years. "It is not much yet," he told Josephine as they rode out to see the land. "Just grass and sky, but I see a house there on that rise. See where the cottonwood trees are. That is where we will build. And corrals there for the horses. We will start with horses, I think, buy some good breeding stock and build a reputation." Josephine could see it too, his vision becoming hers. "We will need a barn," she said, "and a chicken coop. I want chickens and a garden." "You can have anything you want," Austin promised. "It might take time, but we will build it all together." They set the wedding date for August 15th, giving them time to get the basic house built. It would be small, just 3 rooms to start, but it would be theirs. The men from the ranch helped Austin with the construction, working in the evenings and on Sundays. Josephine helped too once she was able, painting walls and sewing curtains from fabric bought at her father's store. Walter watched his daughter preparing to leave with mixed emotions. He was happy for her, could see that Austin was a good man who would care for her, but she was all he had left and the store would be lonely without her. Josephine saw his struggle and made him a promise. "I will come help at the store 2 days a week," she said. "Austin's land is only 8 miles from town. That is an easy ride, and you will come to us for Sunday dinner every week. You are not losing me, Father. You are gaining a son." That seemed to comfort him. And when Austin formally asked Walter to sell him Josephine's mother's wedding ring so that Josephine could wear it, Walter cried openly. "Emily would have loved you," he told Austin. "She would have been so happy to know her daughter found a man like you." The wedding took place on a perfect August day, clear and warm with a breeze that carried the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. They were married in the small church in Trinidad, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Josephine wore a dress of cream-colored silk that her father had special ordered from Denver, and a veil that had belonged to her mother. Austin wore a new suit that he had saved for months to afford, his hair neatly combed and his boots polished to a shine. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation wiped their eyes. Then they walked back down the aisle hand in hand, married partners, ready to build a life together. The reception was held at the store with tables set up in the newly rebuilt space. There was food and music and dancing late into the evening. Austin waltzed with Josephine, holding her close, and she felt like she was floating. "Happy, Mrs. Jennings?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. "Happier than I have ever been," she assured him. "Though it is strange to think this all started with a disaster." "Maybe not a disaster," Austin said. "Maybe it was fate. Maybe that explosion happened exactly so I would be in the right place at the right time to find you." "That is a romantic way of looking at it. I am a romantic man when it comes to you." He spun her in a circle, making her laugh. "I love you, Josephine. I will love you every day for the rest of our lives." "I love you too," she whispered back. "My hero, my husband." They left the reception late, riding together on Austin's horse out to their new home. The little house looked perfect in the moonlight, windows glowing with lamplight from the lanterns Austin had left burning. He carried her over the threshold the way tradition demanded, then set her carefully on her feet in the middle of their front room. "Welcome home," he said. Josephine looked around at the simple furniture, the curtains she had sewn, the rag rug on the floor that had been a wedding gift from Mrs. Morrison. It was not fancy or grand, but it was theirs, built by their own hands and their own dreams. "It is perfect," she said. "Everything is perfect." That night, they began their married life together, learning each other in new ways, cementing the bond that had been forged in crisis and built through summer days of courtship. Josephine fell asleep in Austin's arms, feeling safer and more loved than she had ever thought possible. The first year of marriage brought challenges they had not anticipated. The winter was harsh, with snowstorms that lasted days and temperatures that plummeted below zero. Their small house was drafty and they burned through firewood faster than expected. Several of the horses Austin had bought with borrowed money came down, with an illness that required expensive veterinary care. There were times when Josephine missed the relative comfort and security of living above her father's store. Times when she and Austin argued about money or about whose turn it was to handle some unpleasant chore. Times when she was lonely with Austin gone all day managing the horses, and she had only the chickens and the wind for company. But there were far more times when she was grateful beyond measure for the life they were building. The pride in Austin's face when he sold his first trained horse for a good price. The way he held her close on cold nights, sharing warmth. The quiet evenings when they sat by the fire and talked about their days, planning for spring and the foals that would be born and the garden they would plant. By the spring of 1884, things had stabilized. Austin's reputation as a horse trainer was growing, and buyers were coming from as far as Pueblo to look at his stock. Josephine had turned one room of the house into a small business of her own, taking in sewing and mending from the women in town. Between them, they were making ends meet and even managing to save a little. And then in May, almost exactly a year after the explosion that had brought them together, Josephine realized she was with child. She told Austin on a Sunday evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. He had been talking about building an addition to the house, maybe adding a proper bedroom and a bigger kitchen. She let him finish, then took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to need that extra room sooner than you thought," she said softly. It took him a moment to understand. When he did, his face went through a rapid series of expressions, confusion, then shock, then overwhelming joy. "Truly," he asked, his voice cracking. "We are having a baby in December, I think, right around Christmas." Austin let out a whoop and grabbed her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. When he set her down, his eyes were wet with tears. "A father," he said wonderingly. "I am going to be a father, and I am going to be a mother." The reality of it was both thrilling and terrifying. "Austin, what if I am not any good at it? What if I do something wrong?" "You will be wonderful," he said firmly. "Look at how you care for everything around you, our home, the chickens, me. You will be the best mother a child could ask for." They told Walter the next Sunday when he came for dinner. He was quiet for a long moment, then stood and embraced them both. "Emily would have been so happy," he said. "She always wanted grandchildren. I wish she could be here to see this." "She will be watching," Josephine said. "I believe that." The summer passed in preparation. Austin worked like a man possessed, building the addition and making sure everything was ready. Josephine sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart swelling with love for the child she had not yet met. The women from town and from the surrounding ranches threw her a party, bringing gifts and advice and horror stories about childbirth that made Austin turn pale. December came with snow and cold, and on the 23rd, Josephine's labor began. It lasted through the night and into the next day, long hours of pain that had her wondering if she would survive. Austin stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, bringing her water, wiping her forehead. The doctor had come from town, and Walter was there too, pacing in the front room. Finally, just as the sun was setting on Christmas Eve, their son was born. He came into the world screaming his displeasure, a healthy baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's storm-gray eyes. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant in Josephine's arms. "A fine, healthy boy." Josephine looked down at her son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, little one. We have been waiting for you." Austin was crying openly now, reaching out to touch his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his father's finger, gripping tight, and Austin made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "He is perfect," Austin said. "Josephine, he is perfect." They named him Thomas after Austin's father. Thomas Jennings, born on Christmas Eve 1884, was wrapped in blankets and adored by everyone who met him. The years that followed were full and rich and sometimes difficult, but always filled with love. The ranch grew steadily, Austin's reputation attracting more buyers. They added cattle to their operation, then hired their first hand when Thomas was 3, and Josephine was pregnant with their second child. Their daughter, Emily, was born in the summer of 1888, named for Josephine's mother. She had her mother's red gold hair and sunny disposition, a perfect counterpoint to serious Thomas. Walter remained a constant presence in their lives, coming for Sunday dinners and teaching his grandchildren about storekeeping and arithmetic. He eventually hired a young man to help him run the store, his energy not what it once was, but he remained sharp and engaged until his death in 1895. Josephine grieved deeply for her father, but found comfort in the family she and Austin had built. By then, they had 4 children: Thomas, Emily, baby Samuel, and infant Margaret. The original 3-room house had expanded to 8 rooms with a proper barn and corrals and a bunkhouse for the 3 men they now employed. Trinidad grew and changed around them. The railroad came through, bringing new people and new opportunities. The wild days of outlaws and shootouts faded into memory, replaced by schools and churches and organized government. But some things remained constant. Every year on the anniversary of the explosion, Austin and Josephine took a walk together, just the 2 of them. They walked from their ranch into town, 3 miles, retracing the path he had carried her all those years ago. It was their tradition, their way of remembering how they had found each other and how precious their life together was. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked her on their 20th anniversary walk. They were in their 40s now, their oldest children nearly grown. "Marrying a poor cowboy and building a life from nothing." Josephine looked at her husband, at the silver threading through his dark hair and the lines around his eyes from years of smiling. She thought of their children, their home, the life they had created together from dreams and hard work and enduring love. "Not for a single moment," she said, taking his hand. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Austin Jennings. You gave me yourself." He pulled her close and kissed her, there in the middle of the road with the mountains rising around them and the sun warm on their faces. "And you gave me a life worth living," he said. "Every single day you give me that." They walked on together, hand in hand, 2 people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes. Behind them lay years of memories. Ahead lay more years to come, more challenges and joys, more sunsets watched from their porch and more grandchildren to spoil. But in that moment, walking that familiar road together, they had everything they needed. They had each other. They had love. And that, they both knew, was enough to build a lifetime on. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of seasons on the ranch. By the time Thomas was 21, he had proven himself a natural horseman, taking over much of the daily training while Austin focused on the business side of things. Emily, at 19, had surprised them all by announcing her intention to become a teacher, attending the normal school in Pueblo. Young Samuel, 13, showed signs of being the best rider of all of them, fearless and intuitive with the animals. And Margaret, at 10, had her father wrapped around her little finger and dreams of seeing the world beyond Trinidad. In 1905, when Josephine was 44 and Austin 47, they sat on their porch one evening watching Thomas work with a spirited mare in the corral. The original 50 acres had grown to 200, and the Jennings Ranch was known throughout southern Colorado for producing quality horses and cattle. "Remember when this was just empty grassland?" Austin asked, his arm around Josephine's shoulders. "When we had nothing but a half-built house and more dreams than sense. I remember thinking we were crazy," Josephine admitted with a laugh. "And maybe we were, but it was the best kind of crazy." "The explosion was 32 years ago this month," Austin said quietly. 32 years since I walked into that building and found you trapped. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "It was a lifetime ago," Josephine said. "A whole life has happened since then. Our life." Austin turned to look at her, his storm-gray eyes still as intense as they had been when he was 25. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every struggle, every hardship, all of it to end up right here with you." "I know," she said softly. "So would I." Thomas finished with the mare and walked over to the porch, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked so much like his father had at that age, tall and lean and strong. "She is coming along nicely," he reported. "Should be ready to sell by fall." "Good work, son," Austin said with pride. Then, because he had been thinking about it for months, he added, "Your mother and I have been talking. We think it is time to make some changes." Thomas looked at them curiously. "What kind of changes?" "The kind where we step back a bit and let you young folks take more control," Josephine said. "Your father and I have been working this ranch for over 20 years. We are not old, but we are not young anymore either. It is time to pass the reins." "We want to make you a partner," Austin said. "Equal share with your mother and me. The ranch will be called Jennings and Son." Thomas stared at them, clearly stunned. "Are you certain? I am only 21. "I was younger than you when I bought this land," Austin pointed out. "And you have been working beside me since you were old enough to sit a horse. You are ready, Thomas, more than ready." Their son's face broke into a huge smile. "Then yes, I accept. I will make you proud." "You already do," Josephine assured him. "Every single day." That evening they celebrated with a family dinner that brought all the children together. Emily came home from Pueblo for the weekend, full of stories about her students. Samuel peppered Thomas with questions about what it meant to be a partner. Margaret drew pictures of horses and dreamed out loud about one day traveling to Denver, maybe even to San Francisco. Watching her family around the table, laughing and talking and planning, Josephine felt a deep contentment settle over her. This was what she and Austin had built. Not just a ranch, not just a business, but a family. A legacy, something that would continue long after they were gone. Later, after the children had scattered to their various activities and bedrooms, Josephine and Austin walked out to stand in the yard under the stars. The summer night was warm and clear. the Milky Way a river of light overhead. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing and horses moving in the corrals. You ever think about what your life would have been like if that explosion had never happened? Josephine asked. Austin was quiet for a moment, considering. I suppose I would have kept working at the Double M, saving money. Maybe eventually I would have bought land somewhere, built something smaller, but I would have been alone. No you, no children, no real reason for any of it beyond just existing. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. That explosion was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me. Worst because it hurt you, because it put you in danger. Best because it led me to you. It gave me purpose. It gave me everything. It gave us everything, Josephine corrected. Together. Together, Austin agreed. Always together. They stood there for a long time, two people who had beaten the odds and built something lasting. Two people who had taken a moment of crisis and tragedy, and somehow, impossibly, transformed it into a lifetime of love. As the years continued to pass, the Jennings ranch prospered. Thomas married a girl from town, Clara, who proved to be a wonderful addition to the family. They had 3 children in quick succession, giving Austin and Josephine grandchildren to spoil. Emily did become a teacher, one of the best in the region, though she chose to return to Trinidad to teach rather than stay in the city. Samuel took after his father's gift with horses, and eventually started a specialized breeding program that brought buyers from as far as Wyoming and Texas. And Margaret, their youngest and most adventurous, did travel. She went to Denver first, then San Francisco, working as a journalist and sending home letters full of her adventures. She eventually settled in Colorado Springs, marrying a newspaperman and raising a family while continuing to write. Austin and Josephine aged gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They became the couple everyone pointed to as proof that true love existed, that partnerships built on respect and trust and genuine affection could weather anything. On their 40th anniversary in 1924, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were over 30 people there, 3 generations of Jennings, all of them existing because a cowboy had once run into a burning building and lifted the impossible weight off a trapped woman. Thomas gave a speech during dinner, his own children sitting around him. My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling, he said. It is a choice you make every day, a commitment to building something together, to weathering storms together, to celebrating victories together. They showed us what it means to be true partners. He raised his glass. To Austin and Josephine Jennings. To 40 years of marriage and a lifetime of love. May we all be so blessed. Everyone cheered and drank, and Josephine wiped tears from her eyes while Austin held her hand tight. They were in their 60s now, both showing their age but still strong, still present, still very much in love. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was quiet, they walked out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings. The stars were brilliant overhead and the night was warm with summer. 40 years, Josephine said wonderingly. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck, Austin said. It was us, choosing each other every day even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. I would choose you again, Josephine said. Every time in every life I would choose you. And I would lift that beam again, Austin replied. I would carry you 3 miles, 30 miles, 300 miles if it meant having this life with you. They sat together in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. They had lived a full life, seen their children grow and thrive, built something that would outlast them. They had loved and been loved in return. When I am old, Josephine said, really old and my time comes, I want you to know that you gave me everything I ever wanted, Every dream came true because of you. We are already old, Austin teased gently. But I understand what you mean, and I want you to know the same. You made my life worth living, Josephine. Every single day was better because you were in it. Promise me something, she said. Anything. Promise me that when one of us goes, the other will keep living. Really living, not just existing. The children will need that. The grandchildren will need that. Austin was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, I promise, though I cannot imagine this world without you in it. You will manage, she said. You are the strongest man I know. You lifted that beam, remember, you can bear anything. Only because you were on the other side of it, he said. Only because saving you was worth any amount of pain. They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands joined, hearts joined, two lives so thoroughly intertwined that it was impossible to say where one ended and the other began. Austin passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1929, at the age of 71. He had been working in the barn that day, checking on a mare about to foal, still active and engaged with the ranch even in his old age. That night he kissed Josephine goodnight, told her he loved her as he did every night, and simply did not wake up. Josephine grieved deeply but kept her promise. She continued to live, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about Austin, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him in his prime. She walked that 3-mile path into Trinidad every year on the anniversary of the explosion, making the journey alone now, but feeling his presence with every step. She lived to see the ranch continue to thrive under Thomas's management, to see Emily retire after 40 years of teaching, to see Samuel's breeding program become renowned across 3 states, to see Margaret's articles published in major newspapers. She lived to meet great-great-grandchildren, tiny babies who carried the Jennings name forward into a new generation. And in the spring of 1936, at the age of 75, Josephine Nichols Jennings passed away quietly in her sleep, in the bedroom of the house she and Austin had built together over 50 years before. Her last words, spoken to Thomas as he sat with her that evening, were simple and content. It was a good life, she said. Tell them all it was a very good life. At her funeral, attended by what seemed like half of Trinidad and all the surrounding ranches, Thomas told the story one more time. The story of how his father had run into a collapsing building and lifted an impossible weight. How he had carried his mother 3 miles to save her life. How love had bloomed from crisis, and how 2 people had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of tragedy. They taught us what it means to love completely, Thomas said, his voice strong despite his tears. To commit fully, to build something that matters. The ranch is their legacy, yes, but more than that, we are their legacy. Every one of us exists because they chose each other, because they worked together, because they never gave up. They buried Josephine next to Austin in the small cemetery on the ranch property, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years before. The stone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates of their lives with one line beneath, together always. The Jennings Ranch continued for generations after, passing from Thomas to his children and then to theirs. The story of Austin and Josephine became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of where they all came from and what real love looked like. And every year, on the anniversary of the explosion that had started it all, someone from the family walked that 3-mile path from the ranch to Trinidad, remembering the cowboy who had lifted the impossible weight and carried a wounded woman to safety, not knowing he was carrying his future wife, the mother of his children, the love of his life. It had been a good life, Josephine had said. It had been more than good. It had been extraordinary. And it had all started with an act of courage and compassion that became the foundation for a love story that would echo through the generations. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the very best, if we are brave enough to reach out and lift the weight off someone who needs saving.